Let's start off by sharing my favorite quote by Mother Teresa, which is, "If you judge people, you have no time to love them." And I also wanted to ask the audience if any of you have ever seen a little person before. Raise your hands. This is great. The numbers are definitely growing. But one of the complications is that the amount of little people that are in the U.S. is probably the same as a big state university like University of Massachusetts. There are only 30,000 little people in the United States. So most days I come across people who've never seen a little person before. And I'm here to show everyone, and I hope to eventually show people around the world that even though I look different, I'm no less capable than anyone else. And even my parents, who've been amazing, raising me, as mentioned in the video, they didn't know what to expect when I was first born. And I'm so happy that now it's a lot more common and more people have seen little people before. And I'm sure you've seen other people with other types of disabilities. So it's just great that people are exposed to it so much more now. When I was younger, a lot of people tend to ask if I was bullied. And I'm very fortunate that I had a great group of friends growing up, and I really didn't have to go through a lot of situations that some kids, unfortunately, have gone through today. And I encourage all of you to not bully other people because you know how hard it must feel for that person. And I want everyone after today to know that it's important to include people, especially if you see that they're being left out. Welcome new people into your crowd, because you never know how much you may have in common with them. I had a really great group of friends that I went through school with, going from elementary school to middle school to high school. High school actually ended up being the hardest time for me, as some of my group of friends started discovering dating guys. For me, it was a lot harder because people were afraid of what their friends would think, even if we had a connection. But then when I went to college, I decided to get involved with an organization called Little People of America, where there are probably about 3,000 people that come each year to a convention. Usually the conventions are in one side of the country, and then the next year it's the middle of the country, and then the other side, and then it rotates over the years. So everyone who lives in all different parts of the U.S. are able to be exposed to an experience. So it's a week of just being a part of everyday life. It feels like we're part of the average world when we're in that environment because we're able to be exposed to all people just like us. What I have learned over the years, and I can go into more detail after about my experience living in California, is that even though I'm a little person and I love being exposed to other little people, just like us in all of our environments, we don't always have things in common with people just because they're our type or they're like us. So it's okay to not have things in common with people, but you can still learn from people that you may not have things in common with. I ended up attending school at Providence College. It was primarily Irish Catholic, white people college, so it was tough because even though I'm Caucasian, it was hard for me to fit into the rest of the population because I had another difference, which is a physical difference. I actually had another girl who was in college with me, who was a year below me, and she happened to be a little person who was African American. She had an easier time fitting in school because she had a smaller group to fit into, because there still were some people who were African American. And a lot of people like to say, oh, that person has two things wrong with them, rather than they have an advantage because they have another group to fit into. With little people, a lot of people look at us and say, you're not disabled, but I don't know what you are. The group that we can relate to the most happens to be the disability community because they have to overcome the same obstacles of being stared at and pointed at, and we all just want to be treated the same, just like anyone else. So when I moved up to California, I was really passionate about changing perceptions of little people and all people with physical differences in the media, because that ultimately influences how people are portrayed in society. I know a lot of you raised your hand about seeing a little person. Some of you may have seen someone in real life and had a conversation, and then others see them on TV, which is just as great because you're being exposed to little people. But there are some times when a little person may do something that may cause some negative portrayals. So sometimes I go out in public and people automatically assume I'm just like that person they saw on TV who did something that may not have been as responsible as I try to live my everyday life. I really enjoyed my time out in California, being a part of the entertainment industry. In the video, it refers to me working at a talent agency, which a lot of people refer to as the graduate school of working in the entertainment industry. A talent agency represents actors and actresses, athletes, speakers, and musicians, and they help them get jobs, whether it's on TV or live appearances, and they really just vouch for them and try to get them out there and exposed to the rest of the world. And we had some great talent, and it was a great experience, and I learned so much. But I realized that I just didn't want to be an agent, so after 5 years of being there, I worked in casting, which was fun as well, where you pretty much pick out who would be good for different TV shows. We had to make sure that everyone was practicing and doing the best job possible before we let them be on TV. And then I decided that I wanted to come home to Massachusetts and be close to my family and start really educating people in the Northeast and then hopefully in the rest of the country about my physical differences, because I think one of the best ways for anyone to teach anyone about their difference is just by being themselves and help people realize that they're unique inside and they come to life with a different perspective. About being active in sports, a lot of people ask, oh, how were you able to participate with your average height peers? I had a great time being a part of the larger environment, and everyone was really great at cheering me on. I had a great swim team in high school, and I was on the sailing team in high school. I played soccer from kindergarten through 12th grade. People were even really supportive during my surgical procedures. A lot of people look at a little person and they say, oh, they're different, I don't know what to do and how to deal with the situation, but they also don't know one thing that we don't like to share with people is that there are a lot of medical complications, but we find a way to get through them. And the reason why we don't want to share with people is because we don't want them to think that we're even more different. And I think a lot of people, even in this room, I'm sure there are people who may have an internal disability or something that they go through in their life. And I think it's always important to be able to share it and be open about it. So when I was 3 years old, I had bow legs, meaning my legs went out like how my arms are, and it was hard to walk. So I ended up having bone taken out of my legs. And then when I was 13, I had bone actually in your pelvis. There's a lot of extra bone that isn't always needed. It's not really needed to function if you need to access that bone. They ended up taking bone out of my pelvis and putting it back in my legs so they could watch my legs grow so they would straighten out. And then when I was 15, I had a major surgery where I missed 29 days of school. It was so hard for me because I didn't want to fall behind, especially after so many years of being with my peers who were so accepting and understanding. It was hard to think that I would go back a grade and be with a whole new group of people. So luckily, I was able to get all caught up on schoolwork, and I was able to graduate with my class on time. When I had my back surgery, I actually was so fortunate to have a doctor who was known for separating Siamese twins of the brain, which is probably one of the riskiest surgeries in the world. And I'm really blessed that I was able to have that doctor. And I look at a lot of my friends who happen to have similar medical complications, and they're having so much trouble trying to find the right doctor because a lot of doctors don't want to take a risk on something they just don't know about. And with doctors, it's similar to with clothing. A lot of people ask about clothing and how I find things that work. I find the things that work the most are dresses because a lot of them have short sleeves and they're shorter, so I'm able to wear them whenever I can find those that fit. But there are a lot of people who say, why doesn't someone go into the business of becoming a tailor, just customizing clothes for little people? But the market's so small, it's hard for people to commit to something like that because they're worried that they're not going to get a large audience or enough customers. And same with doctors. Doctors are afraid to take that risk because they just don't know how many patients they'll have. And it's a legitimate concern, but I think what everyone needs to know in the overall message is that we're all the same and we can be treated in similar situations. Sometimes different types of people may need different types of attention, but if we all work together, we can get through it together. Just when you're approaching a little person or any other person with a different type of difference, physical difference, or even internal difference. I spent time volunteering at a heart camp, and a lot of the kids who I volunteered with were afraid to tell everyone that they had a heart condition. And then there were situations where they would have a medical incident and people wouldn't know about it because they were so afraid to tell other people. For me, I can't hide that I'm different. So I encourage everyone to open up to people and share their differences because you never know what you can learn from each other. And so one of the things is you don't make assumptions, you ask questions. To me, no question is offensive. I'd rather someone ask a question than point and stare and laugh. And then I think you should treat others the way you want to be treated, no matter what the situation is. You should give everyone a chance. And I think anyone in this room, and everyone in this room, is capable of anything that they want to achieve. You just have to work hard towards it. And no matter what, don't let anyone tell you you can't do what you want to do because you're here for a reason and you're meant to do what you want to do. I'm going to take this time to open it up to questions. Remember, no question to me is offensive, so ask away.
You have a custom car?
Custom car?
Yeah.
I actually have pedal extensions, which were shown in the video, and that's actually all I needed. Sometimes I use a pillow so my knees can go past the seat because I just need to have flexibility with the knees. The only thing we have to worry about is if the pedal extensions are not tight enough, because it has happened where the pedal extension has fallen down. It's a very scary situation. Now, looking for a car, I'm in the process of looking for a car out here, and I think I have to also pay attention to the emergency brake. I want to make sure it's in the middle rather than on the side, because you have to be prepared for a situation where that could happen. But that's the only thing. I just have the extensions, which are an extended pedal on top of the pedal, and then sometimes I use a pillow, but other than that, it can be any car that just fits right.
What exactly made you want to go to the entertainment business?
So he asked what made me want to go to the entertainment business. I think the reason is just seeing some negative perceptions in TV and in movies, and I wanted to find a way to change those and bring more positive images to entertainment. I never had the desire to be an actress myself, but I wanted to help other people who are acting try to know that if they're agreeing to a role, they're representing a whole community, so they should be careful to what they agree to. And it'll also help their career if they stay only in the positive roles.
What are some advantages to being a little person that somebody average height?
I think some advantages are, she asked what some of the advantages are of being a little person as opposed to an average height person. I think in some situations people are more comfortable coming up and saying hi. Other situations there are people who are afraid to come up and say hi. But one thing I love is that those people who I do get to, who come up and say hi, end up sharing their story with me, and then they start feeling better about themselves because they're able to talk to someone about some difference that maybe in their family or with themselves. And I love when people can open up. Just one example is at the talent agency, one of the partners, who's kind of like a principal of a talent agency, he opened up to me and told me that his dad had no legs. And he represents big actors like George Clooney and Robert Redford and a lot of different people. And he had so much fear talking to anyone else about it. But I loved how he was opening up to me about it. And I wish that people would open up more to other people because you can learn so much from that. So I love when people are able to open up, and I guess sometimes being able to get in places on the children's price. I'll take advantage of that where I can. Sometimes if I can fit in children's clothes, mostly it's just jackets that they're cheaper than what I'm used to paying. Shoes are usually cheaper if they're smaller. So there are a lot of advantages, I think, just trying to understand the whole world and how people act, and without even being a psychologist, I can tell just how someone is as a person just after meeting them for 5 minutes. And I think that comes with coming to this world with a different point of view.
What was it hardest to make friends?
I'd say it was hardest to make friends after I felt like I lost a lot of friends in high school. It was tough because there's so many different events going on because people are getting excited about graduating, and there's just everyone's celebrating getting into college, and I just wasn't always included, and it was tough. But I think I had a lot of reassurance after I got to college, and I met some people in the Little People organization and realized that we all had similar experiences. And now as I get older, I find it's a lot easier. So I encourage all of you, while you're still young, just include people and welcome people into your friends, because no one deserves to go through life alone.
If you could take the opportunity to go back and like before you were born, and you have the opportunity to not be a little person, would you?
I don't think I would. I enjoy being a little person, just the only difference is that I wish the outside world would be more open and accepting of it. I think we've come a long way, and there's still a long way to go, but I definitely wouldn't change the way I am.
When you met someone, what was your key? You met someone for the first time, you know, you're a little person. What was your key first reaction?
He asked when I met someone for the first time, would it be that I talked to them first? Just them, never seen. I think it just comes down to the person themselves. If they haven't been exposed to a little person, they can choose to be open and ask questions, or they can be very standoffish. And I think those who are standoffish are harder to talk to and harder to convince that I'm no different. So ideally, I enjoy those conversations when I can educate someone who's never met a little person. But there are those situations where you give the basic story to the people who are standoffish, but you just don't know if they're going to change. And just one quick story to go with that is even my freshman year in college, which was my first year in college, I was really close friends on the phone with one of my college roommates, and I didn't tell her I was a little person because I didn't think I needed to. And she ended up being so standoffish when I first met her, and it took about 6 months of living with her for her to open up and be accepting. It was really hard because we got along so well on the phone, and then she just was a different person. There's a lot up there. Yes?
Like you said, there's 200 types of people. What's the name and
So she asked there are 200 different types of little people. What's the main difference between a lot of them? A lot of it has to be how we're shaped. Not everyone has an average height torso like I do. Some people have even shorter torsos and shorter arms and legs. Some people have a lot more medical complications. I think that there's a lot just on how people's bones are built and how their skeletal character is. And the people who I was talking about even in the video, primordials, their lung and organ capacity is just so small, that's why they're not able to live past a certain age. So it's really just different things in the bone structure and the skin and the head that make it different. I'll go over here. She asked what my least favorite reaction is of people who've seen little people. One time I was out with my family and I saw a mother point to her child and say, "Look over there, someone different." And for me, that was the most offensive situation because usually a parent's supposed to teach their child to embrace and accept differences. What I love about this generation, of all of you guys, is you have the ability to also go home to your parents and say, "Oh, I met a little person today. She really is no less capable." And then even maybe your parents who haven't been exposed to a little person can know how to approach the situation in the future.
How tall were you when you were in kindergarten?
I think I was pretty much the same height. She asked how tall I was in kindergarten. I think I was pretty much the same height as all of my friends, and then everyone started growing after that past me.
Do you have any siblings? If so, are they all siblings?
I have one sister, and she's actually an average height person, so she's 5'4". To be a little person here, 4'10" or under. So she's 5'4". Well, some people when they're younger, just as they're growing, may be under that height, but at full growth, the tallest little person is 4'10".
In kindergarten, did you tell on your friend that you were a little person or specifically you was the same height as you?
He asked if in kindergarten if I told my friends that I was a little person. I think they could tell probably because of the way my structure was. I actually have the same amount of skin as an average height person, so I think they could see that I looked a little chubbier in the arms and legs, and my head was a little bit bigger. But I don't think they thought anything differently just because I was the same height, so they kind of thought I was the same as them. And then they started realizing more as they grew past me.
Sometimes people with disabilities, they're good at something else. You have something like that.
They're good at something else. He was saying sometimes people with disabilities are good at something else. Do I have something like that? I did this at the other school. I'm going to try it out. I'm a little rusty at it, but it's standing up without using my hands. Slippery.
What do you like to do for fun?
What do I like to do for fun? That's a good question. I like to travel a lot. I really love going to big cities and walking around. I definitely get a lot more stares in big cities, but it's fun seeing how people react. I have a boyfriend who's also a little person, and he lives in New York, so I travel to visit him. And one of the complications is that when you meet a little person at a convention, they're not necessarily from your area, so you learn about long distance, but it's definitely worth making work if you can.
When you play like soccer and stuff, you go passing the ball more or less than you
They would definitely pass the ball called me less because they didn't think that I'd be able to make it to the goal. I ended up playing defense a lot, so it was fun blocking the ball from getting in the goal. But midfield was my favorite because I was kind of in the middle, so I had the opportunity to go to the opponent's goal, but I wasn't restricted because I could stay back as well if I wanted. But they definitely passed it less because they just didn't know if I'd be able to help them keep the score up. You both want to go? Do you mind repeating that?
If you had a child, would you have a child?
If I have a child, it's an interesting situation. I'm dating someone who has the same type of dwarfism as me, and it varies with every type of dwarfism. But there's a 50% chance there will be a little person like myself and him. And then there's a 25% chance where it would be average height, so a little person could be a parent to any of you in this room. And then there's a 25% chance where it would have double dominancy, which is two dominant genes that intersect, and most likely those births don't end up lasting more than a month. So some people decide to carry the baby full term regardless because it could be a misdiagnosis, and then they end up passing away within the first month because of the two dominant genes. So it's the same amongst all the people with my type of dwarfism, but it varies with all the different types.
At what age did you stop getting taller?
I think I stopped getting, she asked at what age did I stop getting taller. I think it was about 13 or 14. He asked if there's ever been someone in my school who didn't like me because I'm short. There definitely have been. I don't think people will flat out admit it, but they'll admit it to their friends. And since I'm a curious person and I can tell how people react to things, I found out about it, and you just have to understand that that's them and they may not change, so you have to be okay with that happening. If average height?
It's two average people have dwarf.
If two average height people have the dwarf, one of them has the dominant dwarf gene. So I think it's 1 in 25,000 births. So every 25,000 person can have a little person as a child.
Are you related to anyone that is a little person?
I'm not related to anyone that's a little person. Little People Big World. That has been a great show for awareness in the Little People community. One thing I wish that they showed is more of them interacting in a big city so people can see how little people are stared at and all of that. But one great thing about that show is they do go through their son's surgeries. They actually have 3 kids that are average height. And the reason for that is that the mom has my type of dwarfism, but the dad has a type of dwarfism where he doesn't carry the dwarf gene. So that's why there's only one, because the percentage is just so much smaller than having a little person child. Yeah. It's okay. I have more right there. I should, and he asked if I eat less than your average person. I should, and I wish I did. I've been better lately. As I've been home, I've been trying to go to the gym and work out a lot, and then I'm hoping to shrink my appetite, but I should be only eating as much as someone my height, and weight's definitely been a tough thing that I've struggled with my whole life because I do enjoy eating.
Where do you live now?
So I live in Weymouth, Massachusetts, so it's about an hour away.
Have you ever met a real, like, famous little person?
I have. I've met he asked if I've ever met a real famous little person. I've met Warwick Davis, who was in Willow, and he's been in some other movies. My roommate from when I was in California, he was in the movie Bedtime Stories, and he's been in a few other shows. Yes, she asked if people ever stare and whisper, and yes, they definitely do, and that's why I always encourage people to ask questions rather than staring and whispering, because I can hear it. I know what's happening when it does.
The organization that the Little People on Little People Big World, are you in the same organization or are you in a different?
Yes. So she asked if I'm in the same organization as the People in Little People Big World. The father actually has an organization that it's called Coalition for Dwarf Advocacy, and it promotes adoption of little people, because especially in other countries, little people aren't accepted. They're accepted even less, and people end up giving their children up for adoption because they just don't know what to do. So he really encourages people to consider adopting a little person because it'll bring joy to their lives.
How tall are you exactly?
I round up to 4'1", but I'm 4 feet and a quarter of an inch.
You know, I said my package really big, like
I've met people who know him, but I haven't met him. People say he's a nice guy. He does some crazy things. He asked if I met Me-Man, who's known from a bunch of movies. So he's one of those people who gives people mixed feelings about little people, so everyone has to be careful about how they perceive him and how they perceive other little people. Which one?
From Al.
Oh, Peter Dinklage. He asked if I've ever met Peter Dinklage. I was actually on set in Providence. They were filming the movie Underdog at Disney, and I ended up meeting him. He's one of those people who's an amazing actor, and he sets a great example for little people. And he really carved his own path, and I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy being around my average-height peers as much as other little people, because we have to just show that we're no different. So it's about competing with other actors for him, and he's just great, and he's getting himself out there, and he's a great example.
Do you find the term midget offensive?
Yes. He asked if I found the term midget offensive. Unfortunately, it's gotten a bad name for itself because a lot of people think that it's related to the circus and people who perform in the circus. So if you ever see a little person, most likely they do not want to be called a midget. He asked if I've ever gotten frustrated that I'm short. It happens sometimes, just when I'm trying to reach things in the store and people around me just don't seem warm, because I can tell by people's body language, and I just want to reach a gallon of milk, or I want to get something quick, but I have to wait until I find someone who can help me. Does my family ever what? My family has always taught me that I don't need to be treated any differently than anyone else, and that's the best thing that anyone can do to any little person. Treat them the same, because they want to give it their all, and they want to be given the same chance as everyone else. So the best example for any parent to teach anyone is that they should be treated the same and have to work just as hard as everyone else. She asked if I can ride roller coasters. My doctor recommended at an early age that I shouldn't ride roller coasters that are upside down roller coasters. He probably said that I shouldn't ride roller coasters at all, but I have ridden those that aren't upside down. He asked if I've ever met Mini-Me from Austin Powers. I almost did, but I didn't. I haven't. I'm actually, he asked if I'm considered small among my little people friends. I'm actually on the taller side. I'll go to a convention and I'll actually feel tall. There are guys who have my type of dwarfism who tend to be a little bit taller just because guys end up being a little taller in any population. And, well, in some cases, not all cases. But I'm on the taller side of my friends. He asked who's the smallest dwarf in the world. I think there's something in the Guinness Book of World Records where it's like 1 foot something, 2 or something.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have time for one more question. If you have questions after we exit the auditorium, you can quietly make your way down the front after we dismiss. Up top in the blue shirt, what's your question?
He asked how I feel with average height people walking down the street. I feel fine until someone makes a comment. So as long as no one makes a comment, then I'm okay.